Hey, I'm Abbey.
And I'm Shannon.
And we're sisters.
My big sister Abbey has a Master's of Divinity from Earlham School of Religion and has been telling me Bible stories for probably 15 years.
And my little sister Shannon has seen 13 versions of Jesus Christ Superstar and has read parts of the Sermon on the Mount. Together, we're bringing you fun facts, historical context, and Bible stories.
Well, Bible stories according to you.
No, according to you.
According to you!
This is the Bible.
According to my sister. Hi, Abbey.
Hi, Shannon. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful.
Why are you wonderful?
No, I've actually had a really good day. This morning I got to go out to... I wanted to go to D.C. I couldn't go to D.C. The March for Our Lives is happening this weekend, and I couldn't, obviously, go to D.C. Also, there were a ton of people. I've seen pictures. Looks terrifying. I'm glad I wasn't there.
We're introverts.
We're introverts. It was, a lot of people, and introverts from a rural place, so I don't know how to conduct myself in a city.
But you went to the protest in town because you're still
so there was
this important thing.
It was. I think it was a really important thing. So I went to the one in our small town, and it was probably 200 people, and we walked around the local college campus and came back, and there were a couple speakers. They tried to get people from lots of different viewpoints. They had some high schoolers speak, a teacher. It was really cool. This issue is an interesting one for me, I think, because as Quakers, we're both, pacifists, but I think as human beings, we have to be kind of realistic.
Yes, it's a very nuanced issue, but, people being shot is not okay.
Yes.
And we need to do things to make that less...
possible.
Yes, but less possible.
Okay, Abbey likes to think about things really gray, and for me, ideally, it would be if I were in charge of the entire world, nobody would have guns ever, and the people in Alaska will just have to deal with the coyotes or whatever it is up there. Me, black and white,
yeah.
None. No guns, ever. But you have to be really realistic. We live in, so we're both from a really rural place, where we legitimately get the first day of hunting season off after Thanksgiving, so people can go hunting with their families. It's definitely a different narrative than probably an urban narrative when it comes to guns.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think we have, and most people in our community have been affected by some form of death by gun.
Yes.
By guns that will still be legal to get even if we do an assault rifle ban, or
yes,
an AR-15 ban, or whatever it is we're trying. Really dangerous, high-capacity guns.
Yeah.
So it shows how much I know about guns. I know nothing about guns. I just don't want anyone to have any guns ever.
Showing your liberal side there.
Yeah. So it's interesting to know that I want nobody to have guns, and at the same time know that it is an important part of this culture, and it is a legitimate thing.
Yeah. And you can have guns safely and so on and so forth, but where's some common ground that we can walk on so that school shootings don't happen and mass shootings don't happen, or at least are incredibly rare and very hard to do.
Yeah. And I'm sure some certain homicides and violence against women, that kind of stuff, decreases completely.
Yes.
So that's why I went to the rally. Also, I think it's amazing to see a bunch of high schoolers so we started doing lockdown drills sometime when I was in middle school, maybe high school. I
never did them.
We weren't doing lockdown drills when I was in elementary school. And these kids have been doing them their entire lives. A girl at the rally spoke who was at Newtown, Connecticut. She was at a middle school 10 miles from Sandy Hook. These are kids who legitimately go every day to school and do lockdown drills, and that's weird. That's a weird thought to have. And so watching them stand up and be this is ridiculous is totally inspiring and completely amazing. And I'm in awe of them and their ability to be intersectional at the same time.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what that was 3 years ago, and these people are they've got it. They're we don't want school shootings. We also don't want shootings in other places, and they're trying to bring in other narratives while they're doing it. I'm floored.
Yeah. Progress is being made in many different ways.
Yeah. So that's what I've been up to. Anyway, yeah. Can we go over to the Bible story time with Abbey?
We can.
right, what do you got this week?
Yeah, so this week is actually the first part of a two-parter, so we're going to try this.
We're going to do our first two-parter?
We are.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so this actually comes as a request from our dad. He has mentioned that there's a movie called Samson that came out. I checked the date. It came out in February. And so we should do a podcast around the story of Samson in the Bible.
Listen, as one of my favorite things to do is to go watch religious movies in the theater, I have never been more disheartened that I didn't go see this one. I kept planning on it, and then something would come up, like visiting you would come up, or visiting Jody came up, or the night I was going to go see it, my friend was like, hey, you want to go watch Black Panther and Jumanji? And I was like, yes, of course I want to do that. So I never got around to seeing it. I'm so sorry, Abby.
It's okay. I'm not even sure it was in our town, in our theater, but...
It was at ours. Movies 10 likes to have them religious films.
All right, well, so this one is for you, Dad, and it's Samson, and it's a two-parter because while Samson is about 4 chapters long...
In the book of
Judges. It's Judges 13 through 16 or 17. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Which is Old Testament?
Which is Old Testament.
You gotta put me in my place, Abby. I have no idea where I'm at.
That's fine. I was actually going to get to that.
Okay.
But it's about 4 chapters long, and I was like looking like, well, I could do this story, but it only makes sense in this context if I add it with this story, and, well, that's less interesting with this story. And I thought, well, maybe the commentaries would give me something, and they only vaguely gave me things because, as we'll probably see, it's kind of, what do we do with this kind of story? So people have ideas, but...
Okay.
So... We're going to skip over the beginning part a little bit, really focus on the second and third chapter of Samson this time, and then next time finish up with the Samson story. So we're going to leave just like one short story before Samson and Delilah, which is the story everyone at least has heard of. Everyone, I guess, in quotes, is the most famous Samson story.
Yeah.
So that will be next time, and this time will be the stories leading up to that.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
So, as always, context is important. Mm-hmm. So, as you mentioned, this story takes place in the Old Testament, and so it's the stories about the Israelite people. At this particular point in their story, they have left being slaves in Egypt, they have spent the 40 years in the desert, and they have conquered parts of the land of Canaan.
All right.
So all the tribes, there are 12 different tribes of Israel, they all have their own land. At this point, they're settling down, kind of getting homes and families and stability to some degree. But there's like no central government, there's no king. And so in times of crisis, Israel is ruled by judges, is what they're called. So this is why it's coming from the book of Judges. So they're kind of just like regional people where people come and they lead for a while, but there's no like, then their children lead, and they're not like necessarily prophets, though some of them have those characteristics. But they're people who most often rescue the Israelites from being conquered by some of the surrounding people.
That's wild. I've never heard about that. I just know, like, God said no kings, and then eventually there were kings. Like, I didn't know that there was an interim where there was a system of judges.
Yeah, it wasn't like a formal system. It kind of just people sort of rose or appointed by God, or God said this person is going to do it and has a relationship with them. A lot of them are really fascinating, so we will be coming back to various of these people.
Yeah. And is judges like the best... I assume it's the best translation of that word, but they sound like military officers as opposed to judges. So why did it get translated that way? Do you have any idea?
I don't have any idea about that. I can see if I can find an answer before next time.
Okay.
I know that sometimes, specifically one of the judges, Deborah, was also kind of known for solving disputes. Yep, there was a woman.
The we'll get back to it later thing. Okay.
Yeah, she also was known for solving disputes between people.
Okay.
So, I mean, there was probably, for some of them, that level, but most of the stories are around more military things.
Okay.
So.
All right. So we got the system of judges in Israel.
And the story begins... Samson is the last judge in these stories. And so at this point, Israel has been conquered by the Philistines, which is a people in the same region. And so the Israelites have been occupied for 40 years.
Okay.
And so Samson's mom who is awesome and we will get back to. She deserves her own podcast, I think, but I couldn't figure out how to sneak it into this larger two-parter. She can't have a child.
The story of all women in the Bible.
Yeah, but an angel comes to her, says, don't worry, you're going to have a kid, and he'll be like deliverer of Israel. The special thing that she is told is that she should not drink wine or eat unclean food because her son is going to be a Nazirite, I think is how you say it.
What's that?
I don't think we're very clear exactly what it is, but it's kind of like a sect of Israelite people who they didn't drink wine or alcoholic beverages, they didn't eat unclean food, they didn't shave their hair.
Yeah. So within the Israelites, like there's a smaller section of Israelites who are some version of... Yeah.
It's kind of like a branch where they follow special rules. And so she wasn't supposed to do that, and her son wasn't supposed to do any of that either.
Okay.
And as far as we know, she didn't tell anyone else besides Samson about these rules or that he had to follow them, and this is where his strength comes from.
So this section of people already existed at that point. Like, she knew of them.
As far as we know. Yeah, as far as we know.
Yeah.
So all of what I said is actually going to be more important in part 2, but I thought I would mention it here anyways.
Yeah.
So, the first thing that Samson actually does when he appears on the stage is he sees a Timnah woman who is a Philistine, and he goes to his parents and says, arrange it so I can marry her. And that is the first thing he says, basically. He demands that they make this arrangement for his marriage with her, and his parents are like, I don't think that's a good idea. She is, a Philistine, the one oppressing the Israelites. And he's like, make it happen. I want to marry her. And so his parents kind of go...
That's his opening scene?
Yes, that's the opening scene.
Of this rom-com, because this is... Right? This is... It's not a romantic comedy?
I'm not sure I would call it a romantic comedy.
I'm disappointed now.
You'll see why. At this point, like in various points of the story, there's kind of like this on the side of, but don't worry, God made this happen. Like, God made Samson desire her because that's part of his plan.
Okay.
So, Samson and his parents head over to Timnah to arrange the marriage, because this is still in times when parents arrange the marriages of their children. Mm-hmm. And I guess they're walking through this valley of wine, or like wine... I guess they're more probably not wine trees.
Let's just you pop one off, uncork it, and you got a bottle of wine. That's how it works.
Yeah, it's like a valley of wine. I think that's the translation of it.
Yeah. Vineyard.
And he must get separated from his parents at some point because he hears this roar of a young lion, and then the Spirit of God comes over him and he kills the lion. It's like rips it, tears it apart. But he doesn't tell his parents. Lions are unclean animals. So they head off onto Timnah. They arrange the marriage. There must be some going back and forth. Because a little bit later, Samson is walking past this lion again, which is dead, lying in this field, and he sees bees around the lion, which he thinks is weird, so he goes and looks around and sees that there is honey inside of the carcass of the dead lion. So
Abby, there's got to be symbology happening here, right? Are you going to explain something like that?
Some Christians have tried to make symbol of, like, Christ out of Samson and the lion and stuff, but it's kind of like bending into pretzels to make it happen.
Okay.
So, forgetting all of those cleanliness rules and laws he's supposed to be following, he scoops the honey out of the lion carcass and eats it, and then he goes, meets his parents, and hands it to them, and they eat it, and he never bothers to tell them where the honey came from. So that happens, and then he has this big, like, wedding celebration, because apparently, both parents agreed to a wedding, and a bunch of people come to the wedding, and he has this brilliant idea. There are 30 men there, and he makes this wager with them. Like, I am going to tell you a riddle, and if you get this riddle correctly, I'll give you 30 linen garments. But if you can't, you all give me 30 linen garments. I guess that's what wagers were at that time, linen garments.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, and so he says this riddle. Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. And it's the honey and the lion, right? So one's going to...
riddle.
Yeah, so exactly. So no one's going to know the answer to this, right?
Yeah.
So it's very unfair. Like, it's a riddle set up for him to win and get all the proceeds. And so, for the first two
Abby,
nights,
I don't like the protagonist of this story. I find him unreasonable and a little demanding.
It gets worse.
I think we need a rewrite.
Just hold on a little bit.
Okay. I gotcha.
So it's a riddle that they can't answer. And they know this. They know he's tricking them somehow.
Yeah.
So after like 2 nights, they go to his new wife, because it's like a 7-day party, wedding celebration. So like night 2 or night 3, I can't remember which one it is. I think night 3 maybe. They go to his wife and say, "Your husband's told us this riddle. We can't figure it out. Make him tell you the answer to tell us, or we will burn you and your father."
Oh my gosh!
And so she begs and pleads with Samson, like, "Please tell me the answer to this riddle. I'm your wife. How could you not tell me?" And he's like, "Well, I didn't even tell my parents, so why am I going to tell you?" But she finally nags him enough till he finally gives her the answer.
Oh, did the Bible say nag?
It says nag.
No!
It says nag. At least in one version. I can't remember if it was the NIV or the NRSV. But it says nags. It says nags in another place in this story that we'll read in part 2.
I'm containing the crazy, Abby.
So he gives her the answer. She turns around and gives it to the men who threatened her.
Yeah. Please don't burn me alive.
And so they come to him, and he gets furious.
Yeah.
He's like, "You must have been sleeping with these men to give them the answer. How terrible." And he storms out.
Abby, I'm so nervous right now.
So he storms out. He goes to another town, kills 30 men, takes their garments, gives it to these men to, like, reward their winnings, and then, I guess, disappears for, a little bit, because the dad of the woman, the Timnah woman, who never gets a name, is like, well, I guess he divorced her, so he gives her in marriage to somebody else. And so when Samson shows up again, and he says, "I want to go see my wife," the dad's like, "I thought you divorced her because you went away, so now she's married to somebody else."
Abby, I'm silent because I'm in so many layers of shock right now.
Just wait for it. So Samson gets mad again, and he goes and gets 300 fox, ties torches to their tails, lights the torches, and has them go through all the Philistines' crops, burning them down.
This is going well.
Yeah, I think the last 2 things the Bible says, the Spirit of God allowed him to do this. He can only has the strength and stuff when he has the Spirit of God. Again, these are side notes. Samson hasn't talked to or about God really at this point at all. So all the Philistines' crops are destroyed. They're pretty pissed. They're like, "Who did this?" And they're like, "Well, Samson." And so they figured Samson only could do it because he was the son-in-law of this one guy. So they go to the house of Samson's wife, former wife, and her dad, and burn the house down.
Who burns the house down?
The Philistines.
The Philistines do it.
In retribution.
For the burning of the crops. Okay.
So Samson runs to Elam, I think is how it's pronounced, this place in Judah. The Philistines follow him. The Philistines are talking to the people who are in the land of Judah there, which are part of Israel.
Okay.
And
is it one of the 12 tribes, or is it...
Yeah, one of the 12 tribes. They kind of explain what happened. So, like, the people from Judah are like, "Oh, well, we'll go get Samson for you." We don't know why. So...
Because he probably told them the same riddle, and they got mad, and they're like, "Yeah, you can have him. We don't want him."
That part's one of the murky parts. So the people from Judah go to Samson.
Okay.
Samson says, "Well, you promised you're not going to hurt me, right? You're just going to turn me into the Philistines." I'm like, yeah, we're not going to hurt you. It's like, "Okay, cool, yeah, go ahead and bind me." So they bind him up. They take him to the Philistines. The Philistines take him, and then the Spirit of God comes over him. He breaks his bonds, grabs the jawbone of a donkey, and slaughters 1,000 people, Philistines. And then for the first time in the entire narrative, he praises God and then says, "But now are you going to leave me to die of thirst?" And so God opens a rock and water comes out and he drinks it.
Abby!
And that is where we're going to leave this story at the moment.
I can't.
So this is Samson, who I am not a fan of. So...
Abby, I'm so upset right now about the absurdity of this.
So, okay.
Give me some commentaries or something.
Let's take a few deep breaths because this is a horrible story.
Yeah.
There are some really horrible stories in the Bible. This is, I would say, one of the ones up there.
What surprises me is you've told me 7 different stories at this point. All of them have had redeemable qualities, really cool things, and I have known none of them. I guess I knew the Elizabeth story, but like the rest of them I had never heard of. I've heard of Samson. People have made a ton of movies about Samson. Why?
Okay, so I was really struggling with this.
Yeah, understandably.
And so I took a step back, and I tried to think about it in a different context, and then some of the commentaries kind of alluded to this a little bit.
Okay.
Samson's their superhero. They're an oppressed people.
They're occupied.
Right?
Yeah.
They're occupied. And Samson is this really strong guy who, while he seems to be doing lots of things out of anger and revenge, he's at least strong, and he is, like, killing these people who are oppressing them, right? He's giving them the justice that they're probably longing for. And the Israelites and the Jewish people have been oppressed for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's probably got to be some, like, you know what? We had someone who was strong, or we had someone who didn't get squashed by this oppression. And, like, as someone who's never been really oppressed, I have a hard time sympathizing or having that mindset. But you know what? I could maybe see, like, really wanting that, like, desire of just crush them. Just, like, you know, like, I'm tired of being oppressed.
Somebody who can do something.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so I think there's this layer of he's the superhero, he's the hero, he goes in and sure he's got character flaws, but you know what? He did something, he fought back.
Okay.
And especially, let's be in American culture, we like those kind of characters, right? We like the strong person, the person who doesn't let people oppress him, someone who apparently likes women. We like those characters. Think of the American narrative or the American mythos, right? It's about being strong. It's about being powerful. It's about not letting other people put you down or oppress you. And so he is, in some ways, very quintessentially the American person, the cowboy in the Wild West, right?
Yeah.
Someone did him wrong, and so he's going to take vengeance. He's the vigilante. He embodies these American ideals that we have. And that's why there's probably the story is, like, perpetuated for so long, and it's one of the stories you hear more often.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that is one thing, and I think we have to acknowledge that. The other thing, I guess one or two other things, lots of people, lots of commentaries, all to the same thing of, like, wow, he is really different than pretty much any other character in the Bible.
Okay. Yeah.
And you can even make the case, so, like, I said that Samson was the last judge, right?
Yeah.
And up to this point, the judges have continually, like, kind of, like, deteriorated in terms of some of their moral characteristics, and he was the last one, right? It's as low as you can go.
Yeah, it's a mess. So he was, at some point in this story, he was made a judge? Or is that to come?
It was like an official thing, like, now you are the judge.
Yeah.
It was this term that was put on them later, I think.
Okay.
They were compiling all these stories, right?
Yeah.
Of these leaders that appeared in this time period and put it.
Yeah. Like
in
you would
this book of
compile
judges,
any
like-
story about a community where you had really cool people around.
Yeah, yeah.
He would be one of them. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was never named a judge. So in that context, so, like, things have been just continually deteriorating. The people are oppressed for 40 years, but never in the story do they cry out to God to rescue them, unlike they have in other periods in the book of Judges. So, like, this deterioration of the Israelites' relationship with God. And there's a deterioration in the quality or the moral value of judges, culminating in Samson, because things get even worse after Samson. And yet, kind of one of the larger narratives in the book of Judges that could also be seen here in Samson is that God doesn't abandon the people, right? So they're not calling out to God.
Yeah.
And God, bless him or herself, is sticking with these people who continually make bad decisions that end up in destruction and chaos. And God kind of says, okay, we're going to try this again.
Yeah.
I'm going to send someone to help you. And looks around, and what does he have to work with? He's got Samson, or he or she has got Samson. And if that's what God has to work with, God will take it and do the best that they can with that.
Oh my.
So in some ways, it's a narrative of, like, God not giving up and God working with what's given, even if that's not great quality or character.
Yeah.
God is still there, and God's still gonna fight. God may not come down physically like they do in other parts of the Bible. Now it's God working through people.
Yeah.
And God can only do things with the quality of people that's been given.
Right.
And if those people aren't great, God's still going to work with them, but it may not have as a nice or happy ending, or tying up or wrapping up of things. So in some ways, I mean, not trying to make Samson a happy story or like one that's like ignoring these atrocious things and like escalating warfare, but like you can kind of see like, you know what, I may not be a perfect person. Humans in general probably not perfect people, but this is what God's got to work with, and God's gonna just kind of stick with us and work with what's there.
I'm not going to argue that the Bible is particularly consistent, but in other characters that God has chosen to work through, he sometimes finds like meek people or people with stutters or something like that. I'm confused about why he would pick Samson out, but
that's not explained.
Yeah.
Samson's mother is pretty cool and pretty religious and pretty devout, so maybe God was hoping Samson's mother would have more influence.
Yeah.
But I mean, it could also be like, look, Samson pretty much so far in the story hasn't followed any of the laws that were given to him.
Yeah.
He's walking through valleys of wine when he's not supposed to drink.
Yeah.
He's eating unclean food when he's not supposed to eat unclean food. He's lusting after these women who are oppressing his people. Pretty much ignoring God until like the very end of what we just talked about. And God's even then still like trying to sneak into the story. I'm like, okay, we can work with this. We can do this.
Kind of,
it's not gotten bad enough that I'm abandoning you yet.
Like, that's kind of cute in a way. I don't know, you get like the Tony Starks of the superhero world where he's just like, he's the dark anti-hero of the Old Testament.
Yeah. I guess the one other thing I mentioned to point out in this story is like more of a literary thing of like Samson's the trickster. And like folklore, there's always the trickster who isn't good, isn't bad, has some extra knowledge, extra skills, and so like who the riddles and those elements is playing a bit of a trickster role. Mm-hmm. So someone raised that up as an interesting point. They didn't go deeper into depth of it, but like, okay, so if we're looking for this is more like a literary tradition, a folklore tradition, everyone has to have that trickster, I guess. And Samson may be that trickster.
Yeah. All right. I feel like usually we can pull something together from the stories you bring and say like, this affects my life today, or I can see how this is important or something like that. And I think maybe you win some, you lose some, but this is really fascinating to me just in general because it's like an interesting story I didn't know about before, I guess. But I'm interested to see what happens in the next section to maybe pull this all together a little bit better.
So part 2 kind of ties it together, and I don't know if some conclusions, but some things happen that, I don't know, turn things, but adds another layer on. That wouldn't add mattered as much as we haven't talked about this part beforehand. So I'll just like reiterate, like the Bible is a compilation of various stories that people have put together to try to understand their faith and their religion and God. And so some are easier to connect with our lives now, and others are not easy to connect with.
Yeah.
While I will probably always struggle with Samson for so many reasons, it was helpful to me to think of like why might some people appreciate Samson, especially if they're oppressed people, and the idea of like God won't give up on us even if we're like Samson.
Yeah.
Not really following the rules or the laws and escalating violence, and like God's still going to be there with us, still working with us.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's redeeming qualities for me, but I mean there's some things we can at least work with. Makes you think on a deeper level, or on a different level. Or
I can't believe you're being the optimist on this one.
Oh, you have like
maybe you're being the contrariist. It's so pessimistic that your only reaction is to be an optimist about this, Abby. You're being your typical self.
My typical self. It's like what do I do with this? And then so whenever I get to the place of like this is so terrible, what can I do with this? That's when I kind of go, okay, so what are my biases?
Yeah.
And then I try to look at it from, okay, so my bias is
definitely, like we talked about in the intro, like our biases are definitely anti-violence.
Yeah.
So it's unfathomable to us to understand that kind of narrative.
Why this would be a good story,
But it totally could be.
And I'm a woman, so why would I like someone who's not necessarily kind to women? And like so on and so forth. So I try to really hard to take a step back and kind of say, so there must have been something in this that made it into the Bible.
Yeah.
What are my biases, and maybe what can I look past my biases?
That's
to find
smart.
Something.
Yeah.
Even if it's not like oh yes, now I think violence is good. It's kind of like, okay, well, you know what? I'm not oppressed, so maybe this is like a really uplifting story to people who are oppressed. And that makes me stop and think, and I think grow as a person.
Yeah. Even just being aware of, like, the thing
Yeah.
that you're having issues with in that story.
Yeah.
And why. So,
Yes,
cool.
exactly.
It's not completely story related, but it's, like, personal related, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, whew,
Ooh, thank
That-
you. I guess I can say thank you for bringing that story, Abby, even if it's...
I will say part 2 is slightly less traumatic.
All right. I look forward to the less traumatizing sequel.
It's more the conclusion, so.
Okay. Awesome.
So, take a breather and go over to silly stuff with Shannon.
Yeah, deep breaths. Super deep
Silly
breaths.
stuff with Shannon.
Woo! I feel bad about this now. I'm gonna go for it.
Go for it. We need a break after that.
Well,
And you are our comic relief.
that's okay. Well, when I found out you were doing Samson, my immediate thought was, shoot, I didn't go see that movie, and that made me sad. So I immediately tried to figure out if there was a way for me to see it. Sometimes they go direct to DVD. It did not go direct to DVD. It wasn't out at Movies 10 anymore.
Okay, so maybe we won't see the movie before next time.
Yeah. So, out of luck getting to see the 2018 version of Samson, I did go and look and see if there were other Samson movies, because Samson is one I've heard about, Samson and Delilah. Mm-hmm. Like this epic love story, right? It's the greatest love story ever. And Abby is shaking her head so much right now, I can't even tell you. So, I found a blog, Bible Film Blogs. He talks about Bible films, and he was saying that there are a lot of Samson movies. Like a lot. In multiple languages. I don't even know where I can start talking about this. Okay. The first one he found was in 1902, 1903, which was a foreign film. I'm not sure from where, but that's the oldest one, and obviously the newest one is 2018. And there are like 40 some in between.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, and he was like of all the characters in the Bible, this one probably has the most movies about it. And having seen the list of Moses movies, I'm not sure that's true, but it's a lot.
I mean, they're both really good stories if you think of, like, action and heroes and stuff. And
Yeah.
there's a love story in Samson.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Sort of. Well,
Which we'll talk about next week, but...
so I looked some of them up, obviously. And one I did fumble across was a Hindi version of it. So
Interesting. Like a Bollywood?
Oh, I wanted it to be Bollywood. I wanted it to be Bollywood so bad, Abby, and it wasn't.
Aw.
I watched like the first 20 minutes of it, and it was from the 60s, and it's really just a strong guy going from one wrestling match to the next wrestling match. So I didn't know what was going on because I can't speak Hindi, but I got the gist that this guy was strong.
He is strong. He is known for his strength. I guess I did not emphasize that.
Yes.
He is known for his strength.
Some of these movies are called Samson, but they're not actually about Samson. They're just about a strong person who happens to be called Samson.
So were you able to, like, actually watch any of them, like, the whole way through, or just...
Yes. Well,
Clips, okay.
Sort of. So, I don't know. I didn't want to watch a 1960s version, because there's this whole, like, Captain Kirk thing about the 1960s, where guys are just super, like, macho and whatever. Just, kind of sleazy. I just don't like
Yeah.
it. It makes me feel smarmy. So whenever I find like a topic or a movie I want to watch from a Bible characters, instead of watching the 1960s versions, I go even further back. And there are usually silent films.
Yep, I'm sure there are.
Listen, I've watched exactly 2 silent films in my life. One was Moses when we were doing like the practice run for this one.
Yeah.
I found a Moses movie. So I went back and I found a Samson movie. I believe it was the 1922 version, which was originally filmed in Austria. It was like their first epic biblical film. And at the time, like the popular thing to do, apparently, this is what I found out from my 2-movie experience, was to do like the Bible story and then do a part 2 set in modern times where people learn from that Bible story.
Is it done by the same director?
I think so. I think it's just like the same movie, but it goes from like...
No, like, I mean, like, so, like, you've seen 2
Yeah.
old Bible movies.
Yeah.
Did they have the same director or, like, the same writer?
These didn't know.
Huh.
Because this one was done in
Weird.
Austria, and the Moses one was done somewhere else.
Tell me more.
It was only 20 minutes, and the Moses one was significantly longer, so I don't think this was a shortened version, but it definitely didn't... I have never found, like, the part 2 of any of these movies where they go into, like, modern times, which I'm super curious about. I think it would be fascinating. But, so I watched that one. I watched the 20-minute Samson and Delilah story, silent film.
And it was an epic, beautiful love story?
No, I don't understand. So there were a bunch of other movies I saw called Samson and Delilah, and like that were not based on the Samson and Delilah story. And it was like there was this Australian one called Samson and Delilah, and it was about how love conquers all in like really horrible circumstances. Like it was like an Oscar-nominated kind of style film where everything goes horribly wrong, but love conquers all. And so that's what I was expecting. I turned on this 1920s film expecting this like love story, but it's really just the story of how Samson defeats the Philistines, and then he meets this girl, and then this girl betrays him, cuts off his hair, and then he loses all of his strength, and then like he gets it back when he asks God, and he knocks down the pillars. There were like short little acting scenes, and then like the cue card, but it didn't have actual... I don't think they were actual biblical verses. I think they were like paraphrased biblical verses, and then another short little acting scene. I do have a question though.
Okay.
So maybe this is a spoiler alert for next week, but in the Bible, is part of it from the point of view of Delilah?
I don't know if the Bible really has points of view.
Okay, does it talk about like Delilah's motivation for doing things?
Well, sort of.
In like a sympathetic way?
Sort of.
Okay. I was just curious. Okay, I'm asking
There's a very like a literal reason of why she does it, but they don't like...
It's not
think
like
about
she's
the psychological reasoning.
She's not like a sympathetic character or anything like that. I was just wondering because there was this moment in the 1920s film where the point of view, like, jarring, not... I say jarring, but it's not like a bad jarring. Just switches to Delilah, and for a moment I was taken aback because suddenly the narrative wasn't focused on the strong guy, like the strong male lead character, and I was just like...
I like that.
What? What's going on? Are we following the female character now? Like, who's supposed to be just like this beauty? Like this... Anyways, that was really cool. I thought it was neat that we switched POVs to Delilah and like what her motivation for doing this thing. Anyways.
Yeah, well, one of the things I want to talk about next time is the women in the Samson story.
Yeah, so we'll get some of that. Yeah, I don't have any like good way to wrap this up. I was just saying that like I found a bunch of Samson and Delilah movies. Some of them had nothing to do with Samson. There's a movie called Samson versus the Vampire Women. And
sounds amazing.
Samson in the Wax Museum. I don't know if this has anything to do with the Book of Judges or Samson, but there you go. So, Abby, what is the Bible?
After this week and this story, it's like low-level trauma.
Just low-level. A little bit
trauma.
Sometimes.
It's like the dead carcasses lined with bees and honey in it.
Hey everyone, this is little sister Shannon. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this 2-part episode about Samson. As always, we want to thank Stephen Kartenberg for use of the song Gutalele's Happy Place featuring Kara Square, which we used for our intro and outro music. You can find more of their music by following the link in the info panel for this episode or going to our Facebook page. There's a link there. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so on Facebook at facebook.com/BibleSisters or on Twitter. Our handle is @BibleSisters. I think that's all for this week. I hope you enjoy watching Jesus Christ Superstar on Sunday. I certainly will. And we will be back on April 11th with part 2 of this episode. Have a wonderful couple of weeks.